Have you ever wanted a way to automatically recognize significant milestones on your stream? Like whenever you hit 1,000 followers, or if you hit a certain amount of subscribers. Well, that's what we're going to be doing today. And in addition to that, we are also going to set up alerts to recognize whenever someone follows or subscribes whenever you are off stream. So in order to do that, we are going to need two main pieces of information. We're going to need our follower count, and we're going to need our subscriber count. Now, our follower count is actually pretty easy to get a hold of. Our subscriber count, however, is not. So we're going to be doing a significant amount of setup just to be able to get a hold of our subscriber count. So before we can start doing any coding, we need to go to our app dashboard on dev.twitch.tv, and we need to add in two more OAuth redirect URLs. So the first one that we need to add, just to make this easier on ourselves, is a HTTP route instead of a HTTPS route, or in addition to a HTTPS route. So we need to first add in this one, so http://localhost:4001/redirect. And then the next one is we need to add in localhost 4001/user token accept. You're going to need both of these, and then make sure you go to the bottom of your dashboard page and click save. Otherwise, these won't stick. Once you do that, we can actually start with the coding portion of this. So in order to start things off, what we're going to need to do is pull in a few separate files. So what I've done is I've shifted our file system import to right below our configuration import, because we need to import two specific files before we can actually use the data that is contained within them. So we need that to happen first. Otherwise, none of this is going to work. So the first thing that we're going to need to import is what's called a user token. Now, this user token is similar to our Twitch access token in that it allows us to make direct calls to the Twitch API. However, the difference is that the user token allows us to access information that is specific to a given user. So in our case, we are trying to access information specific to my Twitch account, so Sir Silverstar. So the first thing you're going to need to do is create a JSON file in your source directory over on the left. And you want to have just a JSON object in this with these attributes. And you want to have them to start off as empty strings. Now, once we actually set up the logic for this, we're going to have these filled in automatically. Once you have that file created, we can start creating our variables to use it. So what we're going to want to do is we want to create a changeable variable. So we want to have this as a let. So we want to have this as let user token configuration equal to the JSON object that we just created in this file. So what we can do is we can just copy and paste it. And then once we have this variable created, we can import the data from the file and then reassign that information to this variable. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a try catch block, which is what you typically do with file reads. So a try catch block, and then the catch block, we're just going to have a parameter of a file error. And if a error occurs, we are simply going to console.log out the error. And within the try block, we want to create a variable called config file data. And we want that to be equal to a file system, so fs, dot read file sync. And we want this to be a synchronous call because we need all of this information to be read in before the rest of the program should run. So we need this to happen before everything else. And the file that we're pulling in is the user token config.json. However, I have my own specific file that's not being pushed to the GitHub, so I'm going to import my specific file. However, for you, this will be user token config.json. And once we have that information read in from the file, we want to reassign the user token configuration variable to the parsed data, so the JSON.parsed data of the config file, and then that's ready to go. Now the next file that we want to import is actually dealing with the metrics that we want to track. So in this case, we want to track our follow goals and our subscriber goals. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable. So we're going to call this Twitch metrics. And we want that to be equal to another JSON object. And we're going to have 4 attributes in this object. So we're going to have current follows. We want to set that to 0. Next, we have the current follow goal, which we also want to set to 0. Next, we have the current sub points. Now, we are tracking subscriber points instead of individual subscribers because that is a generally better indication of how we're doing as far as Twitch metrics goes than subscriber count. So we're going to track subscriber points here. Now, you can track individual subscribers if you want, but in this case, I'm choosing to track subscriber points. And so we also want to set that to 0. And then we want to track the current sub goal. And for this, you can put this as whatever minimum subscriber goal you want to track. So in this case, I'm going to set this at 40 because this is the minimum goal that I want to maintain in any given month. So you can set this at whatever value you want, but you want it to be the minimum goal of subscriber points that you're hoping to have within a given month. Just don't set this to 0. And so before we can move on, we also want to create another JSON file. We want to call this twitchmetrics.json. And so you can see it's the same JSON object as we created for that variable. It just has all of my current Twitch information on it. And once we've created this variable, we can do the same thing as what we did earlier and import the file. So we're just going to copy and paste this file import up here and then change how it works. So we're just going to create another try-catch block. And in this case, we're just going to call this variable Twitch metrics file data. And we're going to change the file name to twitchmetrics.json. And then we switch this variable right here to Twitch metrics. And this variable right here to Twitch metrics file data. And now we have everything imported that we need in order to use these particular bits of configuration data. So now we can start setting up the functionality itself. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a set of variables to help us track the various bits of information that we want to track for our specific milestones. So I'm just going to copy and paste that in. So what we have here is we have all of the same variables that we had before relating to our current follows, our current followed goals, our sub points, and our sub goal. In addition, we have some constants right here that we can adjust as we need to. So what we're doing is we are saying that we want to track a new milestone, in this case, every 100 followers. And we want to track a new subscriber goal every 5 subscribers. So what that means is, let's say we have a follower goal of 1,000 followers. Once we hit 1,000 followers, we want the system to then set a new goal for us automatically to 1,100 followers. So we want to increment the current follow goal from 1,000 to 1,100. Or you could set this to 250. So you could go from 1,000 a goal of 1,000 followers to 1,250. I think you see where I'm going. And it's the same thing here with our subscriber goal. So once we hit 40 subscriber points, it will create a new subscriber goal for 45 subscriber points, and then 50, and then for 55, so on. And these will be adjusted automatically whenever we start our bot. Specifically, the current subscriber goal, because the subscriber goal can fluctuate depending on how many subscribers that we have at a given time. And now that we have these variables set up, we need to set up a few new HTTP routes in our bot in order to gain access to our user token so that we can get our subscriber count to begin with and have this thing be functional. Now, there is quite a bit of stuff that needs to be done in order to even get a hold of our subscriber count. And the thing about that is that once we do it, we only have to do it once. So once you have all of this set up, you can use this same functionality within your user token to do all kinds of other things with your specific Twitch information. So it's probably best that we just get all of this setup done now. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is, actually, let me get some padding here, is we need to set up a new route in our HTTP portion of the bot. So this is actually going to be in our overlay app, since the overlay app is the HTTP portion of this, and the app portion of this is the HTTPS section. So we want this to be within HTTP. So we want to get a new get route, and we want the route here to be /redirect. And within this, we want to have just a function. It's a regular function that takes in a request and a response. Once we have this, we are going to make a call to the Twitch API in order to get access to our initial user token and user refresh token. So what we're going to do is we are going to make an Axios call, and we want this to be a post request. And as we've been doing up to this point, we want to, once we start an Axios call, we want to say .then and then .catch, just to keep things simple here. And within the catch block, we want to just keep this simple, but first let's just bring this down and this down for readability. We want to just have a error parameter in the catch block that then leads into an error function that will just console.log out the error should we get an error. For the address and the headers that we need for the post request itself, I'm just going to copy and paste that in here. So what we're doing is we are making a call to the OAuth/token section of the Twitch API. And what we're doing is we're sending in some query parameters in a XWWW form URL encoded content type. So the query parameters that we want are our API key, which is our API ID that we got earlier from our dashboard, our API secret, a code that is going to be returned specifically when this route is called, and we want the grant type to be an authorization code. So we're sending in an authorization code, and we're being redirected to the user token accept route that we set up in the dashboard earlier, which we're then going to create a route for here shortly. And it's important also that you have the second argument here be null. Since this is a post request, they don't want any body to be sent in. They want the body to be sent in the form of query parameters. So all of this preceded by the question mark. So you need the null here. And then the third argument is the headers, and it is required as part of the Twitch API that the content type here be application/xwww form URL encoded. So within the then block, what we're going to do is we are going to take in the token response as a parameter, which then leads in to an arrow function. And within this arrow function, we are going to create a few constants. So the first constant we want is the token data itself, which is going to be equal to the token response dot data. And next up, we want to update our configuration file and our configuration variable that we had earlier. So what we want to do is we want to have another constant called updated config, and we want to create a new JSON object using the spread operator, so the 3 dots right here. And then we want to take in the user token configuration. So this creates an entirely new JSON object using all of the information that currently exists within the user token configuration, which is what the 3 dots indicates. We're creating a new object with the same data instead of just referencing the address of the current user token configuration. So we're creating a new object instead of referencing the old one. So what we're going to want to do is we want to, in the updated config, we want to add in a new value for the user access token like this. And we want that to be the token data dot access token like this. In the same way, we want the updated config dot user refresh token to be equal to the token data dot refresh token like this. And once we have all of this, we are going to update the user token config file. In this case, for me, it's the silver user token config file. So I'm just going to copy and paste what I have from here to save us some time in typing. So what we're doing here is we're calling the file system, and we're saying we want to write file to, in this case, the silver user token config.json file. And in this case, for you, it would just be user token config.json, or whatever it is you named your user token configuration file on the left. So that's for the first argument. And the second argument, you want to stringify the JSON object that we created up here. So in this case, we want to stringify the updated configuration. So that's why we are saying JSON.stringify updated config. And this takes in 3 arguments. You could just do this, I think, as 1 argument. However, we're doing it as 3 in order to make sure that things are more readable than they would be otherwise. So what we're doing is we're saying we want the data within the updated configuration variable. We're not replacing any of the information in there. And then the spacing indicates that we want this to be formatted in a specific way. So we want to have a certain number of like enter characters and so on and so forth. So it just looks more like a proper JSON object that we're used to looking at instead of just a single line. So if you need to actually go in and read the information, you can do that easily. And that's it for the overlay app redirect route. So the next route that we're going to need, also I should probably end this before I forget. So before we leave this function, we need to actually send back a web page. So what we're doing is we're saying response.sendFile, and we're using the same Twitch webhook redirect page that we created for the event subsystem, because we actually need to get that in order to get the code necessary from Twitch to take in to get our first user access token. So we'll just pass in the same information that we did for the Twitch event sub redirect. So this page works for both. And now we need to set up the user token accept route that we put in on our Twitch app dashboard. So what we're going to want to do is we want to say the overlay app dot get, and this is going to take in 2 arguments again. So the first one being the route itself. So this one's going to be user token accept. And just like before, this one's going to take in a function with two parameters of a request and a response. And this one is going to be significantly simpler. So all we're doing is we're just console logging out that we have accepted our user token. So we're just going to say user token accepted. And then we are going to send back a response code of 200. So response status code of 200. And then we are going to just end the connection. And that's it for those two routes. And now that we have those two new routes set up on our bot, go ahead and start your bot and then go in your browser to this gnarly address right here, which I will try and leave somewhere in the description. And what you want to do is you want to replace this section here where it says your API key. You want to replace that with your client ID that you got from your Twitch app on your dev.twitch.tv dashboard. So you want to get rid of the 20 braces and you want to replace this with your client ID. And this is a similar address to the one that we used back when we set up the Twitch Event Sub system with a small change. This one is looking specifically for a response type of code, whereas the one that we did before was not. So this is what's going to allow us to automatically get a access token and a refresh token. So we are mainly looking for our refresh token in this case. So, which is why whenever we set up this route right here, we are specifically updating our configuration file to set up the refresh token and then save it to a file. Because once we have the refresh token, we should not have to revisit this address again unless we are setting up the bot again for the first time, maybe on a new computer or as we format or what have you. So that should only need to happen once. Now, what are we going to do with that refresh token once we get it? So once we do that and we get our refresh token, we need a way to use our refresh token. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a new function that we're going to call every, say, 10 minutes or so, or whenever it's needed. So we're going to set up a new function. We're going to set it up as an arrow function. So we're going to create a new constant, and we're going to call it getRefreshedUserAccessToken. And this is going to equal a empty parameter arrow function. And within this arrow function, we first want to console log out that we are attempting to get a new user access token using our refresh token. So we're just going to create a console log, and we're going to say refreshing user access token like this. And then we want to make a post request to the Twitch API. So we're going to make another Axios call .post. And just like always, we're going to say .then and then .catch. And now that we have this, we can just bring it down for readability as usual. And as always, we will start in the catch block first and just start off with a single parameter of an error, which leads into an arrow function that will simply console.log out the error should one occur, which we're hoping that we never actually see this. And within the address part of the post request, so where we're sending the request to, we want to send it over to this address here. So we're doing the same thing that we did earlier in the initial user access token request, but with a little bit of a difference. So what we're doing is we are sending another XWWW form URL encoded request to the OAuth2 token address here, but instead of all the extra stuff we sent earlier as query parameters, we're sending the API key and the API secret just as before. However, the grant type is going to be a refresh token, So we're just going to refresh the token that we already have and then get a new one. And then we're passing in the refresh token that we already have. So if the refresh token is about to be expired, so sometimes your refresh token can expire or become invalid as well. So whenever we send this in, we might actually get a new refresh token as well, not just a new user token. So now that we have this, we can go to the then block and put in a parameter of token response, which leads into an arrow function as usual. And within this arrow function, we are actually going to do something very similar to what we did before. So I'll actually copy and paste it so that we can save ourselves some time. So just as before, we are taking in the token data as a constant and assigning it to the token response.data. We're also getting a updated configuration constant, which then is a spread operator, getting the user token configuration just as before. And we are updating the updated configurations user access token and user refresh token in the same way as we did before. Then we are, again, just as before, going to write all of this to our user configuration file, just like so. So just as before, we're going to call the file system and say write file to our user token configuration file, stringifying the updated configuration variable, and then saying that once we've done all this, we console log out that we have successfully done so, and then we also update the user token configuration variable that we assigned up top. And then once all of this is said and done, we are just going to console log out that your user access token has been refreshed, like so. Now that we've done all this, let's just go ahead and collapse all of this extra stuff that we've made just to keep our viewing area nice and clean. And then we can actually start utilizing all of this information that we have set up. And we're going to set this up twice with some minor variations. So the first place that we're going to set this up is where we get our initial access token whenever we start up the bot. So in the response here, whenever we get our access token, our normal access token. So what we have is now I have two access tokens. We have a normal access token, which gives us access to the base areas of the Twitch API, and also gives us access to certain things within the event subsystem. And we also have the user access token, which gives us access to things specific to our own user accounts, on Twitch. So our own user data, so our own subscriber count, for example. So the primary use that we have for this right now is for our subscriber count. We did all of that just to get our subscriber count, which seems crazy, and to a point it kind of is, but at the same time, it gives us access to all kinds of other information that we otherwise wouldn't have access to, and we'll use that later. So what we're going to do is, within the response, after we get our normal access token, what we're going to do is we are going to set a timeout here. So we're going to want to wait 5 seconds before we proceed, because we want to make sure that we have our response data and our access token within the correct variables before we proceed. Otherwise, we could end up getting some rather interesting failures in behavior. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a set timeout with a function and also a timeout of 5 seconds, which this is in milliseconds, so you want to put in 5,000. If you're feeling brave, which at this moment I'm not, you can put in something like 1,000 for just 1 second. And within this timeout function, we are going to make 2 Axios GET requests to the Twitch API. one to get our follows and one to get our subscribers. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to say axios.get. And as always, we will do a then and a catch, and then bring it down for readability, and also bring down our viewer for readability as well. Within our catch clause, we're just going to say error, going into an arrow function, and then we're going to console log out that if something goes wrong with our initial call, we want to say that we have an error retrieving follows, and then we want to print out the error, like so. As for the address that we are going to be calling, we are going to send a call to the users/follows section of the Twitch API. And we want to have a query parameter of toID with the value of our broadcaster ID. And we also need the headers of our typical client ID and our access token, which is why we waited 5 seconds before proceeding, because we need to make sure that we have our access token and that it's valid. So if we do this too quickly, it's possible that the access token hasn't actually been pulled in yet. And within the then clause, we're just going to have a response that leads into an arrow function. And here, we want to have a conditional. So as before, whenever we've done GET requests, we need to make sure that we are actually getting the correct status code whenever we make such a call. Otherwise, we don't actually know if we've successfully pulled in the data. And the correct status code for a GET request is 200. So if the status code is 200, then we will proceed. If it's not 200, what we're going to do is we are going to console log out that we got a bad response from Twitch on follows. And then we're going to print out the response status that was sent, as well as the response data that was sent, so we can try and figure out what went wrong. And that will look like this. And now that we have all of the boilerplate set up, we can actually do the logic that we intended to do. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a constant. We're just going to call this follows. So this is our follow count. What we're getting is we're going to assign this to the response.data.total. The total here is what our actual current follow count is. And then what we're going to do is we are going to say that our current follows variable that we set up earlier is going to be equal to the follows that we just got. And then, just to see if we're doing this right, we're going to say that the console log of current follows, and we're going to print out the follows that we just got. And hopefully it matches what we expect. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set up a while loop in order to determine what our first or next follower milestone is, so our next follower goal. So what we're going to do is we're going to say while the current follower goal variable is less than the current amount of follows that we have. What we want to do is we want to have the current follow goal be equal to what the current value of the follow goal is, plus the next follow goal. So as we said before, if we currently have, let's say, 950 followers, and our stream just blows up overnight, and we're not online. Maybe, you get a viral tweet or something happens on YouTube, and you get 100 followers off stream. What this is going to do is it's going to continuously check if the follow goal that you're going for is greater than the amount of followers that you have, so that it always stays current. And then it's going to assign that to the current follow goal variable. And then next up, we want to check if the follows that we have right now is greater than or equal to the Twitch metrics that we pulled in from our file to our previous follower goal. So we're going to say is if the number of followers that we have is greater than the goal that we set up last time that we streamed, then we're actually going to trigger an alert. But we don't want this alert to happen right away, because if this alert happens right away, no one's going to see it, because your stream isn't actually going to be started yet. So what we're going to do is we are going to set up another set timeout. And what this one is going to do is going to be another function. And the timer is we're going to do a little math. We want this to be 20 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to say 1,000 milliseconds. So 1 second times 60 seconds. So 1 minute times 20. So this is going to be 20 minutes. And then, so we'll just move this right here, we're going to say that after those 20 minutes, we want our chatbot to give an indication of the follow goal that we met. So what we're going to say is we want our chatbot to say, and this takes in 2 parameters if you haven't seen this in a while. It takes in the channel name you want to send the chat to, so in my case, Sir Silverstar. And then it's going to take in the message that we want to send. And in my case, I just wanted to say, we just hit the follow goal, so the Twitch metrics, that current follow goal, so number of followers. And this is going to happen 20 minutes after you start the bot. So make sure that you start your stream within those 20 minutes. Otherwise, this alert will not go off. And then, after we send this to chat, we also want to send this data to our overlay to actually perform the alert. So we're going to move to the next line here, and I will copy and paste this. And we will emit an event to our overlay. We're going to call the event follow goal. And then we're going to send the data of this to the overlay being the current follower goal, which is the goal that we just met. And then we're also going to pass in the next follower goal so it knows what we're looking for after that. Now that we have that set up, we also want to go a little bit of an extra mile and say that we want to be able to know how many viewers, how many people have followed the stream while we were offline, if any. So we're going to do something very similar, and we're going to say if the follow amount that we have, that we just pulled in, is greater than the Twitch metrics dot current follows, so the saved number of followers that we knew we had at the end of last stream. So if we have more followers now than we did at the end of last stream, we're going to do something very similar. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a constant, and we're going to call this offline follows. And that is going to be equal to the current number of follows minus the amount that we had saved before. So the Twitch metrics file minus, the Twitch metrics file and the current follows. So the current number of followers minus the amount of followers that we had saved before. And then we're going to set up another timeout for 20 minutes and then emit an alert. So just as before, we're going to do set timeout with the arguments of a function and the amount of time that we're waiting. So just as before, 1,000 seconds 1,000 milliseconds times 60 seconds times 20 minutes. Platinum Azure in my chat is asking, and what happens if you have a net loss of followers in between streams? In this case, nothing happens. So we are specifically checking if the current amount of followers is greater than the amount of followers that we had last time. I don't think anyone would want to have an alert for something like, you just lost 10 followers since your last stream. I don't think that would be very good for morale. However, if you wanted to do that, you could switch this conditional to say, instead of the followers being greater than the last amount of followers you had, you could say it could be less, and then change these values around and then have an alert for that. But we don't want to discourage ourselves here, so we're not going to do that. So just as before, we're going to have the chatbot say to our channel, and I will copy and paste in the message. I want the message to be that the current number of followers has followed since the last stream. So what we're doing right here is we're creating a ternary if statement because we want this to be grammatically correct. So if this number right here, if offline follows is equal to 1, that means we only have one new person that has followed since our last stream. In which case we want to say one person has followed since the last stream. However, if this is not 1, so greater than 1, we want this to say the number of follows the number of people have followed since the last stream. So we keep things grammatically correct and we don't at least cause myself to rip my hair out, as if I don't have any hair left to rip, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. And then we want to emit another socket event. So we're going to say emit io.sockets.emit. And here we are going to emit the event of new follows and then pass in a JSON object with the information of offline follows with the value of the offline follows variable. And then whenever this is all said and done, what we want to do is we just want to console.log out our current follower goal, like so. And now that we have the current follows and the follow goal being set, the process for getting the subscribers and the subscriber goals is very similar. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste that process and then explain how it goes. So very similar to what we did before. What we're going to do is we are going to make a call to the Twitch API using an Axios GET request. We're going to make a call to the subscriptions route this time, and the broadcaster ID being the query parameter. And instead of, in this case, on the headers, using the client ID and the access token that we got before, the client ID is still the same. However, the authorization is going to use our user access token that we did all of that setup before to get. This is where that comes in. So instead of for the follower alerts, where our authorization header is just our access token like this, for the subscriber count, what we have to do is we have to use the user token configuration dot user access token. So once that happens, what we can do is we can check to see if our response status is 200 as before. And just as before, we pull in our subs. In this case, we're doing subscriber points instead of individual subscribers. So our subs is equal to the response data dot points, and then we reassign the current sub points to that count. Console log out what that value is, and then make sure that our current subscriber goal is accurate. And then just as before, if while we were off stream, we surpassed any of these goals or got more subscribers than we had last time that we were online, we set the timeout to 20 minutes. And if we hit a goal, a subscriber goal, what we're going to do is, and I seem to have missed a variable right here, so I'm going to say the current sub goal. Right? This is why we don't just really copy and paste. Have to be careful about that. So we say if we just hit the current subscriber goal and then send in that, and then same thing for if we got more subs than we did before. We get the difference of how many subs we had before and then send that in and say, in this case, we're doing 2 ternary conditionals here. So because we're doing subscriber points instead of individual subscribers, it's possible that we have more sub points than we do subscribers. And so whenever that happens, we don't want to just say this many people have subscribed, because someone could have subscribed at tier 2 or 3, which means that it's no longer 1-to-1, like the number of people subscribed and the number of points. So we say if it's more than one person that has subscribed, we say that up to this many people have subscribed, because we don't know if it's a singular subscriber that subscribed at tier 2 or 3, or if it's more than one person that has subscribed to tier 1. And since we are doing set points, we have to account for that. And the only other difference is that in the catch block of the initial Axios call, instead of just console logging out that we had an error retrieving subs, what we're doing here is we have to have a conditional. And the conditional is first going to check if our user access token is valid. So we have to first check to see if the error message that we're getting equals request failed with status code 401. If this is the error, that means that our user access token has expired and we need to get another one. And so in that case, we will call the get refreshed user access token function that we created earlier. Otherwise, we console log out that we had an error retrieving subs, and then, just as before, we get the error name and the error message. And that is how we get the initial information that we need in order to set up our follow and sub goals, as well as track them. However, we're not done, because after we do all of that, we need to do it again at a certain amount of time, like every, say, 10 minutes. And so the process here is actually very, very similar, if not nearly identical. So what I'm going to do is, just as before, I'm going to copy and paste this block of code and explain what's happening, because it is, in fact, very similar. So don't be intimidated that this looks like a lot of code. It is nearly identical to what we had before. So what we're doing is, instead of setting a set timeout, we're setting a set interval. And like a set timeout, it uses similar arguments. So what we're doing is we're saying set interval. This takes in 2 arguments. In this case, we want a asynchronous function to happen, so instead of just a regular function. So we need things to happen at the same time that other things are happening. So we want an asynchronous function as the first parameter, and then our argument. And then the second argument, we want the timeout. So in this case, we want this to be 10 minutes. So 1,000 milliseconds times 60 seconds times 10 minutes. And within this, what we're going to do is we're going to first set up a variable that says that our metrics have changed. And what we're doing here is we're actually doing some small setup for the next video. So this is a bit of a sneak peek. So this variable right here is going to be used in the next video. However, we're setting it up now in order to help ourselves out. So what we're doing is we're going to say if the Twitch we're setting up a variable to check if the Twitch metrics has changed. And the metrics being our followers or subscribers or our follow goals or our sub goals or anything like that. If we get any kind of change in those things, this will be switched to true. So then what we'll do is we will do another Axios GET request to the follows route that we did before, using the same headers as we did before for the follow route. And we're using this as a await call. So because we're using an asynchronous function right here, we can say await. So we want this to finish before anything else. We also want other things to happen at the same time. So within this function, we want that to finish first. So once we get our response, we're setting our follows to the same thing as we did before, pulling in from the Twitch API. So the response data total is our new follower count. Now, if the current number of followers is not the same, so if the followers that we just pulled in is not the same as the current amount of followers that we had 10 minutes ago, then we are saying that our metrics have changed and they require an update. So this is going to be flipped to true. And then we are setting our current followers to the amount of followers that we just pulled in from the Twitch API. And then we are going to emit a socket event to the get Twitch metrics event. And this, again, is going to be used in the next video. So please look forward to it. And then just as before, we are checking to see if we have surpassed our follower goal. And if we have, we are going to send out a message to the chat saying that we just passed the goal. And then we're also going to set out an event to the overlay using the follow goal and the same information that we did before. And then we are also going to throw out the new goal that we're looking for. So what we're doing is we're saying that the next follower goal is the current follower goal plus the amount that we set for the next one. So in this case, this variable is set to 100. So if we hit 1,000 followers for the current follower goal, the next follower goal is plus 100, and then whatever else you set it to. So we're sending that to the overlay, and we're also saving it within the bot. And then if something went wrong, so if the status code was not 200, we're saying that we got a bad response, and then printing that out. Otherwise, we are console logging that an error occurred on the initial call. And then once we're done with the follows, we do the same thing with the subscribers. So the first thing we're checking is we're going to send out the call to the subscriptions route using our broadcaster ID. And instead of the access token, we are using the user access token. And if the user access token is expired, so if we get a error saying that the request failed with a status code of 401, then we refresh the access token, just as before. And also, just as before, we pull in the current subscriber count from the response data and the subscriber points. And just like with the follows, we're saying if the current amount of followers is not the same, if the new amount of subscribers is not the same as the current amount of subscribers, our metrics require updating, and we send in the same socket event and then call it a day. And then we check if we have met a subscriber goal. And if we have, we put that out to the chat and then send out another socket event to the overlay, which then is what gives us the alert itself. And then if we did not get a status code of 200 on the initial call, then we just say we got a bad response from Twitch for the subs and print that out. And then once we've made both of these calls to get the new follower and subscriber information, what we're going to do is we're going to check if the Twitch metrics actually requires updating. So if the Twitch metrics requires update variable has been flipped to true, we are setting our new updated metrics to all of the new information that we pulled in from the Twitch API. And then we are writing that information to the Twitch metrics.json file that we created at the beginning of the video, so that whenever we start up the next stream, we will have the most recent information for our followers and subs and those goals within the last 10 minutes. And all of this is going to happen every 10 minutes. And now that we have done all of this setup within the bot to get the information that we need and then emit the alerts, we need to now create the alerts, which is probably the easiest part of this entire process. So in your overlay.js file, or whatever you're using for your overlay JavaScript file, what we're going to do is we are going to create 4 new socket listeners. one for follower goals, one for sub goals, one for the amount of new followers that we got since the last stream, and one for the amount of subscribers that we got since the last stream. So what we're going to do is we're going to, under the socket.on Twitch webhook event listener that we created a while back whenever we did Twitch event subs, we're going to create a new socket listener. So we're going to say socket.on. And for this, we're going to have the event listener trigger be follow goal. And then once we get this triggered, we're going to trigger the function right here and with a parameter of follow goal. And within this function, we are going to add a new alert to our alert queue. So we're going to push something to the alert queue. So alert queue.push. And what we're doing here is we're just pushing some new HTML. So in our case, we're going to use the same types of alert information in CSS that we created already, just to keep things simple and time sensitive for us. But if you want to get crazy and create more interesting alerts for this, feel free. We may or may not end up doing that on stream, but we will see. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another div. This div is going to have an ID of alert container. And within this div, we are going to create a span. And the span is going to have a class of hype section. And we're just going to keep this simple and say within the content, we just hit, and we need to break this up into multiple parts. So single quotes right here and right here, and plus follow goal dot current follow goal. Then at the end, we will just put space followers with some exclamation point. And just to keep this nice and formatted, we'll enter here and then enter here, just to keep that nice and contained. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the alert queue itself actually starts. So we're going to say if the alert running variable is false, then we will start the alert queue just as we did before with the event sub alerts. So we're going to flip this variable to true, and then we are going to run the alert queue function. And the subscriber goal event is going to be nearly identical to this one. So let me just copy and paste it. The subscriber goal event is, like I said, just the same, except we're saying socket.on with sub goal, with the function being a parameter of sub goal. And the alert queue is the same as before, a div with the ID of alert container and a span with the class of hype section, saying we just hit the sub goal, current sub goal amount of sub points, and then ensure that the alert queue is running. For the amount of new followers that we get whenever we start the next stream, we're going to say is we're going to create a new socket listener and say socket.on, and the event trigger is going to be new follows with a function and a parameter of just follows. In this function, we will do something very similar to what we just did with the goal stuff. So what we're going to do is we are going to push to the alert queue some HTML. So we're going to push a div with the ID of alert container. Within this div, we're going to have a span with the class of hype section. And within this span, we are going to break this up and say that the content of this span is the follows dot offline follows. And next to this span, we are going to create another span that is the same messaging that we set up before, with a ternary statement and saying that many people have followed the stream. So I'll just copy and paste the rest. So just as before, in the bot chat shoutout, what we're saying is we have the number of follows and then a ternary if statement saying that if the current number of offline follows is 1, we're saying one person has followed since the last stream. If it's more than 1, we're saying this many people have followed since the last stream. And that's everything that you need for that information. And just as before with the other 2 alerts, we need to make sure that the alert queue is running if it's not already. So just putting in the same conditional. And the new subscriber alert is again nearly identical to the new follower alert. So we will just copy and paste that as well. So just as before, we are saying that we have a new socket listener with the event trigger being new subs, a function and a parameter of subs, pushing in the alert HTML of a div with the ID of alert container. And just as we had in the bot chat message, we are having 2 ternary if statements because we're talking about subpoints. So if it's more than 1 subpoint that we have, we're saying that up to this many people have subscribed since the last stream. And then we ensure that the alert queue is running, and then that's it. So considering all of the setup that we've had to do, all of the actual functionality that we needed to get this to work wasn't that bad. Most of this was just setup. But now that all of that setup is done, we shouldn't have to do that again. So that's going to be it for this video. In the next video, I am going to show you how I created the little webcam border you see at the bottom of my screen, which you may have been noticing was new and may have been curious how that works. So I built that off stream, and I will show you how to build it yourself in the next video, which will be somewhere on the screen around here. So if this video has helped you out, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.